Good morning, everyone. That was like, okay. Welcome to the first Higher Education Appropriations Subcommittee of the year. Clerk, can you take the roll?
Thank you. Chair Stuckloff.
Here.
Representative Morgan. Representative Weiss. Representative Price.
I think she's on Zoom.
Representative Skaggs.
Here.
Representative Kuhn. Representative DeBoer.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Weiss moves to approve the minutes from the committee on April 20th, 2023. Minutes are approved without objection. Here today presenting, we have Dan Hurley from the Michigan Association of State Universities, Robert Lefevre and Colby Cazzero from Michigan Independent Colleges and Universities, and Brandy Johnson from the Michigan Community College Association. Dan Hurley, CEO of Michigan Association of State Universities, for a presentation, if you can come on up.
Good morning, Madam Chair Stuckloff and members of the committee. It's a delight to be with you on yet another spring day in February in Michigan. Yep, it is. I'll get a little closer there. Is that better? So yes, my name's Dan Hurley. Pleasure of serving in my 8th year as the CEO of the Michigan Association of State Universities, which serves as the coordinating board for Michigan's 15 public universities. Appreciate the opportunity to share some observations specifically on the governor's FY25 executive budget recommendations. So my comments are going to be pretty focused on that. Our funding priorities have been quite consistent over the last decade. You have in your folders a 3-page document that speaks to these funding priorities. And they are increased state support, not surprisingly, but specifically in terms of institutional operating dollars, state financial aid, specifically, most importantly, the build-out of the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, and then sustained capital outlay investments, and then related infrastructure dollars for the campuses. And the results of this increased state support, when you add it all up, college affordability, increased college enrollment, academic quality, which our universities are well known for nationally and globally, improved student outcomes, a stronger workforce, and higher personal incomes, among many benefits. So you look at those priorities, and then you look at the current fiscal year budget, and it was nailed, thanks to all of you. The best higher education budget in years, just across the board. A 5% increase in operating support, floor funding for the 2nd year in a row, which helped out 5 of the lower funded schools when you look at it on a per student basis. For the first time in 2 decades plus, $79 million for deferred maintenance, infrastructure, technology, equipment, maintenance, safety. We were very appreciative of those dollars. MIPSR's debt relief, significant dollars, again for the 2nd year in a row, positively impacting 7 of our universities, definitely helping out with their debt burden, allowing them to free up dollars to other more important direct student activity efforts. And then the continued build out, $50 million into the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. And Again, another huge win of this current year budget was major streamlining of our institutional reporting requirements, something we've been working on, begging for years. It happened. Tip of the hat to Rebecca McDonald and Beth Bullion at State Budget Office, my colleague Mia Murphy, Chief Policy Officer at the Association. There will be, thousands of hours of less bureaucratic reporting and paperwork at the university campuses, a lot of dollar savings, but that data and the accountability measures are still there. So we're very appreciative of that. So our budget request to the governor, to our legislative leaders for FY25, again, has been consistent. We have been asking for twice the rate of inflation when it comes to an increase in operating support. Back last fall, that figure would have been about 7.6%. The latest Federal Reserve forecast for FY25 is 2.6%, so double that, 5.2%. Continuation of items funding. Again, 2 decades since we've had it. We need the dollars. I'll come back to some of the needs specifically, but really want to have that recognition from the state that it's important to preserve our campus assets. Capital outlay projects, a few every year consistently. Some authorizations is our ask, and then again a continued steady build out of the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. So that was our request. The executive recommendation from a couple of weeks ago, you see the figures there, 2.5% in operating support increase for the public universities, no items dollars, no capital outlay authorizations, and then yes, a build out of the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, $30 million, which I believe was below the original statutory intent of $50 million for several years. I believe that's based on updated forecast utilization. So what is very important, so we have our asks, and I think this slide just has some facts and figures of why we are so desperate for state reinvestment in our public universities and the hundreds of thousands of students that we serve. You see, no matter how you slice and dice it over the long term, significant, dramatic disinvestment in our public universities. We've gone from 20th in ranking of per capita fiscal support for higher ed to 41st last year. We're at 72% of the national average. This is both community colleges and public universities combined in per capita funding. State appropriations to the universities, we are still $364 million, or 18%, where we were at the tail of the Great Recession. You go back to 2002, inflation adjusted, we're down more than $1 billion. You look at our again, we're not funded on a per student basis, but when you do the math, our community colleges are funded at about 110% of the national average. That is good. That is where we should be. The public universities, we're at about 80% of the national average, and that is not good. We'd love to get to the national average and beyond. I would also note that if you look over, again, we've been very pleased with the state budget the last couple of years, institutional operating support. You average it all together, it's been about a 7.5% increase over the last 2 fiscal years, depending on the institution. But you look at inflation over that 24-month period, it was actually 10%. So increases in state operating support, but we also are contending with inflation as well. And of course, these operational dollars are essential for steady planning, improved college affordability, providing student supports, et cetera. This is a very interesting chart here. It just simply shows when you look at institutional operating support provided to the universities and you just adjust for inflation, it shows that in FY, the current fiscal year, we are at the same level as we were in 1982. I haven't seen a similar chart for K-12, but I'm guessing it would look very, very different. It's very important that we fund K-12 adequately, given the return on investment of a college credential. a very strong labor market demand, we should try to change the trajectory we see here on this chart. A couple words on items fundings. And I often call it deferred maintenance, but it's also often those invisible projects, elevators, HVAC units, underground infrastructure, electrical, efficiency, sustainability initiatives, sidewalks, you name it. We did a survey a couple of years ago, and we had upwards of $4.4 billion of backlog deferred maintenance needs. You look at the collective age of our campuses, more than 1,700 years old collectively. We have 8 schools that were established in the 1800s. That is a lot of deferred maintenance needs. And obviously some buildings have gone away, but there are a lot of other buildings, and again, that underground and invisible infrastructure that needs to be updated. So our public universities, as with any state, are some of our most premier public assets, and we should have some state dollars to help preserve those assets. No doubt you have all heard, again, appreciation for the items dollars, but in the current fiscal year budget, it was an either-or scenario. If you received a capital outlay authorization, then you forewent your items dollar allocation. And our message is simple. They are two very different needs. Capital outlay authorizations are for new buildings, state-of-the-art, and the items dollars are, again, for the billions of dollars of infrastructure deferred maintenance. And those two are separate purposes, separate funding sources, and therefore should be decoupled. On capital outlay, our message has been very consistent, and that is just consistency. That's all. A few projects each year, every year. We were very appreciative of the very robust project package that passed a few months ago. I think there was about 7 university projects in that. That's great, but it was the first package in many, many years, and we kind of have a feast or famine process here. That's not good for the labor markets, sometimes financial markets, and so just having some consistency in that process would be helpful. On the proposed community college guarantee, again, I can't praise enough the governor and her focus from day one of her administration of a focus on educational attainment. And we have seen just some wonderful things happen in the state. I really think that this state in this country is the state to watch in terms of a focus on attainment and investment and affordability. And I want to say that as a sector, holistically, we now are not like unilaterally opposed to free community college, but we do have some concerns. The most obvious one would be what is the potential in terms of enrollment impacts. Tennessee Promise is Tennessee was the first state to put forth a free community college initiative in 2015. If you look at the impact on enrollment at the regional public universities in that state, their freshman class went down 6.2% out of the gate. If you do the math here, you look, I have this, the bottom bullet point. If you go back to fiscal year 22 and you look at the credit hours generated by the freshman and sophomore among the public universities, and you translate that to tuition revenues, and look at what a 6.2% decrease in enrollment would be for a freshman and a sophomore class, that's a $108 million impact. And that's just simply if what happens in Tennessee happened here. And in Tennessee, at that stage, 2015, their enrollment, our graduation numbers out of high school were pretty steady at that time. In Michigan, as we know, we're fighting upriver currents, given our aging demographic here. So we just want to be cognizant of that. We do have, there are alternatives. We want to see if we can find an opportunity to raise all boats, all students served by all institutions in the state. So some suggestions include the public universities in a universal 2 years of free tuition, as was proposed by the Growing Michigan Together Council. Another option, provide 1 year tuition-free at a community college or public university. One that is particularly exciting given the need to fully optimize, harness, maximize the Michigan Achievement Scholarship is to make it a flat dollar award. Get rid of the last dollar component. For the university students, make it a $5,500 flat award and package it before the Pell Grant. Given the fact that the Pell Grant is refundable, that would make a major impact on affordability, especially for our lower income students. Another option would be to increase the scholarship award for those students enrolled at public universities. I have a figure of $7,800 that is equivalent of half of the average of tuition and fees at a public university. So in sum, I hope we can have some additional conversation in the weeks and months ahead to help the universities continue to drive enrollment, working in synergy with the community colleges. And lastly, on the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, you know, I'm very, very pleased that in the current year budget are significant dollars to help with marketing. Those were not there that first year. So the take-up rate was a little bit lower than as expected. I think it was about 62% as opposed to closer to 3/4 of students. And I think you're all aware of the, what it's called, no, the show happening with the U.S. Department of Ed as it involves the FAFSA rollout. All of the institutions in the state and all of the stakeholders in the higher ed universe are helping students, current, prospective, academic advisors, families, trying to get them to fill out the FAFSA, stay engaged, and take part in activities and to you know, take the right steps to prepare for college, and most perhaps importantly, be patient. Your financial aid award letters will get to you as soon as our institutions receive that significantly delayed data from the U.S. Department of Ed. There is some obviously underutilization of the program from an expenditure standpoint, and therefore there may be, to my prior slide, some opportunities for greater investment in the program for public university students. We are pleased that there is language in the current year budget having my LEAP, the new department, establish a Achievement Scholarship Working Group, Advisory Group. I know that's going to be a very large group with a lot of smart people behind it, and I think there's a lot of things that policy and administrative recommendations that will fine-tune that program going forward. So that's my remarks, and again, thank you for your leadership on the higher education budget. Look forward to, I hope the executive budget recommendation is a starting point, and we can build on it in the weeks and months ahead and target a June finalization of a budget. That's always helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. We have a few questions for you. Representative Price is on Zoom. She has a question. Representative Price?
Yes, thank you, Chair Stuckloff, and thank you to everybody there facilitating my attendance virtually today. I'm grateful that I could be there from afar as I recover. I just wanted you to please address, share a little bit more about infrastructure. The state of college campuses, you made some comparisons to what other states do nationally, and I'd like you to share about the infrastructure needs and what you think the solutions are with the tools that the state has for infrastructure improvements and maintenance, deferred maintenance.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so dating back decades, it was more of a practice for the state to provide dollars, of course, for new buildings, but then also dollars to help operate those buildings and for I'd say deferred maintenance. So, you know, any type of maintenance needs, it used to be just items, so information technology, equipment maintenance. After last February's tragedy at MSU, we added S for safety, and that's obviously very, very important across our campuses, and a lot of high-tech aspects of that work. So you look at all of our campuses, and it's not even just based on size. I'll look at, you know, Eastern Michigan University, Lake Superior State University, part of it is built on a, old military barracks. These are old institutions, but want to and do provide high-quality academic programs, and you need high-quality facilities and just all the infrastructure to support those facilities. And so we, again, HVAC, electrical upgrades, efficiency upgrades, technology, fire, safety, you name it. And you add it all up, it's just billions of dollars worth. And I think what would be most helpful, again, is any type of dollars, recognition from the state that it's important to maintain these facilities, and consistency, some type of predictability where the institutions can plan on having these dollars. And so whether it's some type of formula-based or dedicated funding that the institutions can plan on would be helpful. And I would note, I often have to say this, we hope that when any discussion of, for example, these deferred maintenance or items dollars, it's not an either-or proposition. We need institutional operating support, we need items dollars, we need financial aid, we need capital outlay. In synergy, they all put together what are some of the best public universities in this nation.
Thank you. Representative Kuhn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple questions there. And thank you so much for coming here. Hopefully we'll be able to talk afterwards in more detail about the concerns that you have raised here. I just had a couple questions. How many students are currently attending our higher ed universities?
Fall 2023, I'm going to say, is 256,000, which notably, total headcount for the 15 universities up 0.5%. Nevertheless, first time up in 12 years, and our full-time freshman count was up close to 4%, the largest increase in 12 years. And the universities are working very, very hard on their outreach, and some other groups out there helping out as well. But I would give considerable credit to the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with this fall. I would have predicted a continued steady turnaround, but this whole issue with the FAFSA it's going to make things interesting. But I have a high level of confidence that if the Michigan Achievement Scholarship continues to be built out, it's marketed well, we're all in sync, rowing in the same direction. By the fall of 2025, so next fall and beyond, despite a diminishing high school pipeline, I would not be surprised if every public university, if not every institution in this state, has turned enrollment around. It might not be up significantly, but I think at least flat, because the affordability metric has improved so dramatically with that achievement scholarship.
Thank you. Madam Chair, could I ask? Thank you for that very detailed information. Can you tell us what the 4-year and 6-year graduation rate or any other quantitative data reflecting student success for your universities? Yeah,
so I don't have those at the exact top of my head, but I would think for the public 4-year sector, the federal graduation rate, yeah, do you happen to know? Federal graduation rate as a sector? 77. Yeah, okay, so I know that. I was going to go there first, so, or second. So often, schools are measured by the federal graduation rate, which is a lousy metric. It doesn't include part-time students or students that transferred. I am counted nowhere. I transferred one time as a student. I'm a dropout, a failure, and yet somehow I have 4 degrees from 4 Michigan institutions. That's why that metric is bad. However, the state's student success rate would have counted me in as a positive outcome measure, and that is 77%. The state rate is about 18 to 20% higher on average than the federal rate. So anyway, 3/4, about 77% graduate within 6 years with a 4-year degree.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Were there any other quantitative measures of student success that you would suggest that we look at?
I mean, the biggest one is graduation rate. Retention is important, first year to second year, so on. Brandy will probably speak to transfer rates. There's some interesting, aspects there. We have a pretty positive transfer rate 2-year to 4-year in the state. So that's something to be proud of, and we're always working on building out those articulation agreements and building strong partnerships with our community college partners at the local and regional level.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you, Chair.
Representative Morgan?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Dan, for being with us today. I think Representative Kuhn asked generally one of the questions that I was thinking about, which was understanding the impact of this new funding. But I just want to confirm this again. I believe what you're saying is that the additional funding that we've contributed over the last couple of years is resulting in more students attending college. And we're looking at that as an impact on our enrollment rates. Is that correct?
So yeah, the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, $5,500 a year for up to 5 years for those entering a public university. That $5,500 equates to a 30 to a 45% discount off the price of tuition among the 15 universities. So that's a major impact. And again, close to 2/3 of students are eligible for it. So it's reaching well into middle class. So I would credit that. And then as it involves the increase in institutional operating support, so this fiscal year, 5% across the board, a lot of that goes to the university is folded right back into institutional financial aid, helping out students even further. But those dollars are, they are for all types of operations, and about 80% of every dollar in higher ed is spent on the human element, so faculty, staff, salary, benefits, comp, et cetera. And it mitigates, most importantly, is the direct correlation with tuition price setting. And so with a 5% increase or higher is going to mitigate the need for universities to increase at a higher rate than they normally would. So that's there's an inverse correlation with tuition price increases and increases in state support.
Thank you. I just wanted to really emphasize that fact that when we help students afford college, it turns out more students want to go to college. Something I know, but I don't know if a lot of people always make that connection about the fact that we are directly assisting students in attending higher education when we invest in them. The only other question I wanted to ask you about, which was, do we have an overall measure of college affordability in Michigan over time? So something that measures, affordability not just by the tuition price, that's the sticker price, but looking at the overall impact of student aid, university aid, federal aid, and the sticker price, and figuring out, are we making college more affordable in our state over time or not? I suspect the answer is maybe yes in the last couple of years, but it was becoming far less affordable over time. So I'm wondering if we have a comprehensive metric that kind of looks at that affordability question.
I think we can get that for you. I think it would be a matter of looking at the net price of attendance. So factor in federal aid, state aid, to your point, major investment last couple of years, institutional financial aid. The public universities provide over $1 billion a year, and measure that over the years and decades against, for example, maybe Michigan household income would be one standard. So we'll get that to you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Skaggs?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, if I may. Number one, I think I want to piggyback
Representative,
off of.
I don't mean to cut you off, but we're a little over time, so.
All right, I'll
yeah,
go
thank you.
quickly then. Want to say what Representative Kuhn mentioned a little bit about graduation success, and that is, and I want to dig in a little bit into the community college guarantee. What is the graduation success of students that transfer from a community college what's their graduation success in those next 2 years or 3 years at a 4-year college?
I can get that data for you. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay.
I do think, generically speaking, it's a positive number. and it may be even higher than native possibly.
Okay. Second question. On page 10, the sort of proposed modifications to the governor's community college guarantee. Do you have dollar amounts for those?
We don't yet.
Okay.
I think the one for making it a flat dollar award, that's probably the easiest to come up with. But yes, I think we need to do that, but we need to work with, officials from state government to, get the best data out there to forecast those figures. So, and I think they're not necessarily listed in order. They might be listed in order in terms of the cost impact.
Yeah, obviously, it would be great to have those. And then, lastly, we're spending a great deal of time, as Representative Morgan mentioned, about doing the good work of improving accessibility and getting more students to see college as an option for them. I wonder how we're doing on retention rates. So, are we convincing them? Are we supporting them to stay in Michigan, or are they taking their talents to Long Beach or other places?
Yeah, so just for the record, for the student retention rates, all the universities have increased their student retention rate and graduation rates, for example, over the last 5 years. It's a much broader discussion on, we're a net importer of college students, but upon graduation, I think there's some export challenges there. And that's where it's much more of an ecosystem conversation in terms of labor market demand, large, robust, healthy cities, livable communities, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I do think of all of the, there's a lot of good recommendations in the Population Growth Council report, but one that focuses on increasing attainment, I think, is going to have that general theme is probably the best impact and best long-term return on investment.
Representative DeBoer?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I can feel that dark cloud with the example of Tennessee's loss of revenue for those first 2 years. And when you quantify that as an $871 million potential loss if everybody goes to a community college for those first 2 years, that is a real pit in the bottom of your stomach. I understand that. So I can see why you would want both community colleges and universities to be included in this new plan. It's definitely unintended consequences that we need to think through as we approach this new idea. So thank you for your input.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And as we are running out of time, but this is just going to be a question that I'm going to ask you of probably everyone in this room. With the absolute blunder and disastrous rollout of the new FAFSA, we are now in a position where financial aid officers are going to be having to do numerous professional judgments because this new FAFSA doesn't even ask basic questions like how many students are in college. Something to think about is what a recommendation might be to help out our financial aid officers at each of our universities, community colleges, how important it might be for additional funding if they may need to hire more part-time people just to get through all these professional judgments. So just something to think about if you can go back to your universities and ask what might happen again, with the absolute disastrous rollout of the new FAFSA. Yeah. Thank you.
We'll do that.
Okay, up next we have, I believe it's there we go. We have our independent colleges and universities for a presentation.
Good morning. Colby and I would like to thank the chair and the committee members to give us the opportunity to talk about the Michigan Tuition Grant and its affordability and access. We are focusing our comments today generally on the tuition grant and how it affects our students. So quickly, we just want to run through who our students are. We've got about 65,000 students enrolled. About 15,000 degrees and certificates are awarded annually. And of that, 11,000 are bachelor's degrees. 97% of our grads complete in 6 years or fewer. 10% of our undergraduates are transfer students from community colleges. We have incredibly strong partnerships with community colleges, both through pathway projects, articulation agreements, and we're actually working on, I think, 3 different grants right now to create further access and smoother transition for our community college partners. Our members provide about $1.3 billion in institutional grants and scholarships, and I wanted to put some context on that number as I was driving in today. I'm sure we've all seen the lottery billboards and how much the lottery provides to the K-12 system on an annual basis. It's also $1.3 billion. So our 24 members provide that amount of relief and tuition for our students. The average grant of institutional support for our students is about $22,000. And all while maintaining a very, very low student-to-faculty ratio of about 11:1. 30% of our undergraduates are over the age of 25 in Michigan and that are enrolled at our institutions. There's a couple points I want to make with that in a couple later slides. And the tuition grant itself is a $42 million line item. That equates to about 1% of the overall higher ed and community college budget, and that helps us provide 20% of the bachelor degrees in Michigan. We think that's some of the best money spent in the state.
Something to add to that on this slide still, on the conversations about affordability. Loan uptake has been going down. There's a lot of robust expansion in financial aid counseling happening at institutions, community colleges, public universities, independent nonprofit institutions. And so loan uptake among students is dropping. And when you hear data about student loans, it's not every undergraduate that's taking debt. About 5 years ago, around 60 to 65% of undergraduates would take a student loan for college, a federal student loan. Now that's down to 50% for undergraduates looking at a bachelor's degree. And so that's even, and when I say now it's 50%, that's last year's data. So that's even without the Michigan Achievement Scholarship investment. So the trends really are going in the right direction on affordability and on student debt. It doesn't mean that it's not a problem, but everyone is working towards helping students achieve more with less loan debt. So I just want to make sure to point that out, that is a metric that's really going in a good direction.
And we also, this is a heat map of the students that receive the tuition grant. Every single district and every single Senate district, students receive the tuition grant. So currently 15,000 students in Michigan receive the tuition grant. 3,100 students receive both achievement and the Michigan tuition grant. As you know, our students that get both, they would receive $3,000 from the tuition grant and up to $4,000 from the achievement scholarship, which is, so combined, it's more than the $5,500 that the publics receive, but for those that only receive the achievement scholarship, it's $4,000. And obviously, the fall class was the first class. 43% of our the MTG students also receive Pell. That's about 6,000 students. And as I pointed out, students from every legislative district in the state receive it. 2,200 of the students are over the age of 25. It's about 18% of the total. We've got 127, currently 127 recipients are over the age of 50. 250 veterans and family members receive it. And I just want to point out, in the blue box, although there is some overlap between the tuition grant and the achievement scholarship, they are not, the programs are not identical. So all the recipients in the blue box would not qualify for the achievement scholarship. They would only qualify for the tuition grant. These are all the different programs, and I know it's hard to read. I'm not going to go into detail. I just wanted to put up there that these are all the student financial aid programs that we have in Michigan. They, as a whole, they can be quite complex, and there are varying ways to qualify for each one of these programs. And the point I wanted to make with this slide is we will not be simplifying Michigan's student financial aid landscape by just removing one of these programs. They are all designed to hit different constituencies, and as a whole, we think all of them should remain intact. As a result of the addition of the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, we had, I want to talk about Olivet, University of Olivet first, because they were the first ones to do it. So if you recall, the final passage of the Achievement Scholarship was done in October, and by December, University of Olivet announced the first tuition-free program for students that are Pell eligible, tuition grant, and get the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. At that rollout, the governor challenged our members to create and replicate that program across the state. And to date, 9 of them have. These are our schools. The schools with the circles on them are all schools that now have a tuition-free program because they're able to package the tuition grant with the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. Obviously, all these programs are now in jeopardy if we eliminate the tuition grant, even if we just do it going forward. And I also want to say, at this point, you know, we've talked a lot, Dr. Hurley talked a lot about the federal rollout on the new FAFSA and the problems that we're having there. Complicating that, the fact that the elimination of the tuition grants on the table, it has stopped our ability to package students in its tracks. Until we have a final resolution on whether it's going to be in the budget or not in the budget, we can't package any students. Typically, we don't know the final result until June. Typically, we've got everybody packaged by February, March. So we are just dead in the water, and this is going to have, we think, a detrimental effect. Just the discussion of it is having a detrimental effect on applications and enrollment. And this is on a year where we actually saw some very good increases in enrollment, about 13.5% for freshmen, and a lot of that is because of the Michigan tuition grant and being able to add the Achievement Scholarship on top of it. And so here's the positive enrollment trends that we're seeing as a result of the increase in aid. And one of the things, and I don't know which slide it's on, it might be this one or the next one, but two of the programs that we looked very closely at as the state was developing the Michigan Achievement Scholarship was showing the past success of both the tuition grant and the tuition incentive program, TIP, and how those programs actually drove enrollment. So when Michigan was declining enrollment overall in college, we were seeing an increase in enrollment for students that were eligible for those programs. And that was some of the data that we were able to show to help convince the legislature to go ahead and not only create fund but pass the Achievement Scholarship. So that the Achievement Scholarship, in our view, is really kind of built on the success of these 2 other programs, and we'd hate to see anything happen to those.
And it's not just the program's existence, it coincided with growth. So the slide that you see here shows, and this is pre-pandemic data, so with an increase in the amount of aid available for the tuition grant, there was also an increase in the number of students. And this graph shows the blue line at the top is the actual number of students with the tuition grant. The red line is if the enrollment for those students followed the state trend for overall undergraduate enrollment. But it didn't. That's not what happened. The number of students actually increased. And when we look at the percentage of the students in those years at our institutions, that was a larger percentage of the student body. And so it's not just the existence of the aid, but the growth in aid, which is why you see on the bars when the tuition grant went from 1,800 to 2,000 to 24 to 28, that was helpful. And as Robert mentioned with the development of the Achievement Scholarship, it's not just the existence of a program, it's that it needs to be a volume higher, that it makes a meaningful contribution to that student's ability to afford college. And so that also, we show this in TIP. This data actually goes into last year's information. So the blue line is uptake for TIP students, and then the red line are recent high school graduates in Michigan who choose to attend college. So the overall trend is declining, but for TIP, it's going up. And there's a combination of factors there, but TIP has also continued to expand. It covers tuition fees for students at community colleges, for students at public universities. Our institutions, students receive the community college level, not the same as the public universities, but just showing that the aid makes a difference on enrollment.
And this is the headwind that we're facing now, is that we used to be about 66% of high school grads went on to post-secondary in some form. That number is now down to 49%. That's 30,000 fewer students enrolling in each class, and for us, that's the equivalent of 5 freshman classes at independent colleges. That is a tremendous decline over the last decade. But as we spoke earlier, and as Dr. Hurley touched on, we turned a corner. Our original projections on the Achievement Scholarship would be that it would take 3 years for us to stop the enrollment decline, and then we would start growing. We stopped it in the first year. I mean, that's a huge testament to the power of the Achievement Scholarship and how much the level of funding that brings the affordability back into the fore for mostly for a lot of the middle class families, and it's certainly on the access students. So that's all really good data. Although we are everybody's working incredibly hard on trying to get that 49% up, and the Achievement Scholarship, in addition with the Michigan Tuition Grant, is going to help us move that in the right term. One of the things we did want to highlight, this is probably the most depressing slide that we have, is the majority of the enrollment decline over the last 10 years has been concentrated in Pell students. Right? This is one of the reasons why we are so adamant on a universal FAFSA completion bill, because we want to make sure that the Pell students understand that they can afford college, right? Going back to Olivet for a second, when you take Pell, which is $7,500, you add the tuition grant to it, you add the Achievement Scholarship to it, you're over $14,000 in aid on a average tuition of $18,000. And our members are making up that difference, and that's how we're creating the tuition-free programs.
We added
yeah.
a slide.
Yeah, oops.
You don't have this in your packet.
Yeah, this one's not in your packet. This goes to Representative Morgan's question from earlier. We were looking at net price of attendance across all sectors. And as you can see, the total cost right now is 18 and 11, but if you adjust for inflation, it's actually lower than it was in 2012. Right, so both public and private and community colleges have all kept the lid on costs, and actually it's now more affordable than it was 10 years ago, adjusted for inflation.
So this is just for four-year institutions.
Oh, I'm
Actually,
sorry.
the top line is the net price of attendance overall at all four-year institutions, because we're focusing on the students seeking a bachelor's degree primarily. Then the red line is for undergrads with under $48,000 in income. So this is federally collected data that every institution has to report. And so for students coming from those lower income families, that the actual price hasn't changed, which means adjusting for inflation, it's dropped considerably. But if you look at the upper level, the average for all students, even though the volume has gone up, if you adjust it down for inflation, then the price has declined. And this is going to be a similar adjustment that we look at the next slide, and this goes to undergraduate loans. So we always talk about how the tuition grant saves students $22,000 in loans and interest. So over, let's say it's a 5-year program. If you're in teaching, if you're in engineering, oftentimes your baccalaureate degree does take 5 years instead of 4, and you're eligible for the tuition grant for 5 years. 4,000 times 5, we got $20,000. And so if, oh, pardon me, not 4,000, that's the Achievement Scholarship. 3 times 4 is 12. So 4 years, $3,000 in the tuition grant. Then if you look at loans, let's make an average 5% student loan interest rate coming out for federal subsidized loans. Students take an average of 10 to 20 years to pay that off. That's $10,000 in interest. So if a student doesn't need to take that debt, that doesn't just save them taking the loan, it saves them the interest over the lifetime of that loan. And so if you look at this average undergraduate loans per student, again, this is students seeking a bachelor's degree in Michigan, the average debt back in 2010, 2011 was about $8,000. And this was when 60 to 70% of students were borrowing. Now we're down to 50% of students borrowing, and they're only borrowing an average of $6,700. But if you adjust that for inflation going back to $2009, as this graph shows, the dotted line at the bottom, that's less than $5,000 in real terms. So this goes to the financial aid counseling is working. Students, when they attend an institution in Michigan, are getting quality information from the financial aid offices so that they know they don't need to borrow everything that's available to them, and fewer students are taking loans. I look forward to seeing what the data looks like for the coming year, because the Michigan Achievement Scholarship was such an infusion of funding for students. We know University of Detroit Mercy is a good example. They packaged 200 students from Detroit with zero debt, zero loans. So they had free tuition and no debt. That's a really, really big change from what it looked like before. And many of these students maybe wouldn't have gone to college at all, and now they're at an institution, a comprehensive university like the University of Detroit Mercy.
So this slide is just a little bit more detail on the point we touched on earlier about the $1.3 billion in student financial institutional aid that our members provide to students, and its growth over time. So it's increased by about 180% over the since 2010, meaning that we match the Michigan tuition grant $36 for every dollar of the tuition grant. So we really maximize the effect of the tuition grant. Lastly, we just wanted to touch on a couple of things in the governor's proposal that we do support. The forward-looking tuition restraint set for 2 years is incredibly helpful for our membership, so we can plan looking forward. Because typically we set tuition in December to January, and if we don't know what the tuition restraint number is till June, that kind of handcuffs us. So having that look forward is a big improvement. We're very pleased that we're finally moving past TANF spending in the scholarship programs. That was initially supposed to be a stopgap measure during the Great Recession, but we never stopped gapping from that point forward. So having the governor pull all of that out is a great improvement. And then lastly, we support providing additional financial supports for our community college partners. We think the governor's got a great idea. There may be other ways to do it, but we definitely want to move forward on that proposal. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you guys so much. Just for member purposes, we are running out of time, so if you could please keep your questions quick. If you need to come back and answer, totally understandable. First, we have Representative Weiss.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. A couple very quick questions about the tuition grant. I know you mentioned when you talked about the 9 colleges and universities that are offering a tuition-free program by being able to bundle these programs. Do you have a sense of how many students that are currently benefiting from that tuition-free program would no longer be able to be tuition-free if the tuition program went away?
I don't have that the exact number, but we can get that for you today. We have the data, I just don't have it with us.
Okay, and you also mentioned that for the packaging purpose, that typically you let folks know around this time what their grants will be available for the following when they're enrolling. When do students typically declare where they're going to be attending?
In the main, it's in the spring.
Okay.
And that generally how it works is applications in the fall, acceptance early winter, deposits early spring, enrollment early spring and deposits in midsummer. And there's generally drop off in each one of those stages. So until we get to deposits, that's when we start counting on and having all the housing set. but until they show up on campus, you never really know. But Colby just whispered in my ear, to your first question, it was about 1,500 students are currently receiving the free college tuition, and we expect that number to be per class. So by the time we get to the 5th year, that'll be times 5.
And last, just, how long has the Michigan tuition grant been in place?
The effective date was August 1966. It's currently the state's oldest program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative DeBoer?
Thank you. Do you have retention rates for students in the state?
Post-graduation, it's about 65%. The national average is 62. The data on retention is unfortunately a little bit thin. So we are using federal data to come up with that number. We are looking at a different data mining organizations that may be able to get us a finer point on it. They're just very expensive to do. There was one of the public universities a few years ago did an extensive survey on it, and it was very, very expensive. And it turned out their data was actually better than what the average was. And we suspect that's true across the board, but it's just very hard. That data is hard to get at.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that many people also come back, even if they're not
Right.
retained in the first several years. You may leave for graduate school and then come back, or you come back a decade later to have your family here. And so it's the question of retention after a year or 2 or 3, or is it looking at the broader labor pool in the state of Michigan and who attended an institution at some point, either community college, public, or independent institution. So there's a lot of ways to cut it. But to your question, the standard metric is about 65% stay after graduation, and that's across the board for 4-year institutions in the state.
Well, I know the Hope College would be very hurt by this change in the tuition credit, that it's about a third of the student body, about 1,300 families would be affected. And when they attend Hope, they love the community, and as you said, they come back, and sometimes it may not be till they go to Freedom Village, which is a senior living facility, but they come back there because they love being there. It's a sense of home, even if it was in your youth. So it is important that people have choices, and that we preserve a buffet for students in the state of Michigan, that they can choose what fits them, and that we can reasonably support what we can support. I know we can't pay for everything. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you guys for being here. We're going to bring up community colleges. Brandy Johnson's here with us. I understand we do obviously have a hard stop. If we need to, of course, we can bring you back, because I have a feeling you might have the most questions.
It's as a you opened it as a PDF. Is there a way to open it up in PowerPoint? Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and thank you for inviting us to present, and members of your committee, thank you so much for your time. My name's Brandy Johnson. I'm the president of the Michigan Community College Association. We represent Michigan's 31 two-year institutions, including 28 public community colleges and 3 tribal colleges. Our mission is to serve as the unified voice for our colleges, empowering our members to lead in the areas of student success, talent development, and community vitality. A snapshot of the demographics and student profile of our students. Our enrollment is 280,453 students during the last full academic year. Our enrollment actually increased by 3.7% in fall of 2023, which outpaced the national average for community colleges. In terms of completions, about 27,000 certificates and degrees are awarded. That's 1,400 more this year compared to last year. And our student success rates continue to increase when you look at not only completions of a degree or certificate as well as transfers. Our 2-year success rate is the highest it's ever been. For the students that started in the cohort of 2021, mind you, the COVID class of students, 71.3% have either completed a degree or certificate, transferred to a 4-year institution, or are still enrolled and making progress toward the degree. It's important to remember that the vast majority of our students are part-time students and take longer to degree. And this is just within the first 24 months after their initial enrollment. We, as the association and our individual colleges, have made significant commitments to improving our completion rates and our success rates for our students, and we won't take our foot off the gas. Transfer is an incredibly important function of Michigan's community colleges. More than half of the students that walk across the stage at one of Dr. Hurley's universities have community college credit on their transcript. In addition, Michigan is actually a top 10 state for the rate of transfer. And to Dan's point, students that start at community college and transfer to a university actually outpace graduation rates of students that started at the university in the beginning. Michigan's community colleges also play a critical dual enrollment function. Only about 6% of Michigan's high school students participate in dual enrollment. That's less than the national average, as well as all of our neighboring states in the Midwest. Most students that do enrollment do it through a partnership of one of our 31 college. Over 24,600 students are dually enrolled at their high school and at one of our campuses, and a full 77% of those students continue their education beyond high school, compared to 56% for students that did not enroll in dual enrollment. As you know, we continue to be proud of the work that the state and our colleges have done in partnership to make college affordable for adult students, initially 25 and older, and now temporarily 21 and older. Last year, we're starting to pick up the pace of completions and enrollments. So 32,000, almost 33,000 students were awarded Reconnect in 21-22, and now that we're a couple years out from the start, we've already awarded 2,500 associate degrees and certificates. In terms of demographics, 73% of our students are part-time, reflecting the fact that they are most often working and holding down 1, 2, 3 part-time jobs while also raising a family. 35% of our students are 25 and older, and over 50,000 of our students were awarded Pell Grants. A topic of conversation is retention. Our students stay in state. Community college alumni stay local. 95% of Michigan community college students that graduate stay in the state, and 61% actually stay within 50 miles of their alma mater. Community colleges are hyper-local, meaning students utilize them to obtain higher wages and great jobs right in their local communities. And we know that the more you learn, the more you earn, and students that complete just an associate degree will make significant more earnings, both right out of their graduation, but certainly over the lifetime as well. So a couple of things I want to touch on. The first is items. Again, really grateful for the work that Chair Steckloff and the subcommittee members did for proposing the inclusion of items funding in the FY24 budget recommendation and seeing it through to fruition. Prior to FY24, as Dr. Hurley mentioned, the last time infrastructure funding was appropriated for higher education was 1999-2000, but community colleges were not included. So this was a huge milestone for the state to make investments in deferred maintenance for our members. Those items fundings were distributed based on our full-time equivalent rate. Payments to our colleges were made in January and ranged between $300,000 and $5 million based on the size of our institutions. As you can see, these are examples of real-life things that our colleges did with that money. Things like door locking systems, water treatment systems, HVAC, really significant examples. These are things that if they could have had more money for items that they would do at some of our colleges and some of the costs associated with it. These are some quotes from some of our college presidents about the critical need for infrastructure and deferred maintenance. So again, we are very appreciative and hope that the legislature may consider dedicating funding to items in this budget. In terms of our legislative priorities, as a reminder, the business model of community colleges was really built on this concept of a three-legged stool. When community colleges were coming online, some before the 1960s, but a bunch of them in the 1960s, there was an idea that this could be financed through this very balanced three-legged stool. 33 1/3 from state appropriations, 33 1/3 from local property tax, and 33 1/3 for tuition and fees. In reality, our stool has become significant wobbly with one leg that is significantly shorter than the other two, and that is in the terms of state appropriations or operations grant. Currently, only 24% of our revenue comes from state appropriations. The local property tax has been incredibly helpful to our member colleges, but it's also important to remember that we've kept our commitment at not going over a 33 1/3% for tuition and fees. It is incredibly important that we keep our colleges affordable for students and families, this is particularly true if you were to look at our tuition rates over the last 20 years and adjust it for inflation. Our tuition rates have actually gone down in inflation-adjusted dollars. In terms of additional operation support for community college, as I mentioned, the proportion of operations funding from the state per full-time equivalent student has decreased over the last 25 years, while contributions from local sources and tuition continue to increase. With proper state support, community colleges will have more resources to accomplish our shared goals to increase enrollment, to support students through completion, and reach the state's goal of getting 60% of our workforce able to attain a post-secondary certificate or degree by 2030. Sustainable state investment will ensure community colleges have the resources they need to keep up with rising costs while maintaining affordable and high-quality programs. If the legislature and the governor were to increase by our operations by 10% and sustain that for 4 years, we would restore the wobbly chair. It would that is, for context, we are grateful for the governor's 2.5%, but if the legislature, again, I'll say it, was to do 10% each of the next 4 years, so basically phasing in, we would be able to get back to that 33 1/3 coming from state appropriations. We would ask the state to dedicate $100 million for improvements to those items type projects, so that and inclusive of that would be funds to develop affordable, very affordable on-campus housing where it is needed. In some of our particularly more rural community colleges, housing is, we talk about the housing crisis writ large. The housing crisis for rural community college students is quite significant. We are not talking about revenue-generating dorms. We are talking about shelter for students that are working to better their lives by working on their degrees so that they can make a bigger paycheck in the long run. We'd love to be a partner with you as we continue to work to improve our student success outcomes. We think that could look like expanding opportunities for dual enrollment, requiring that community colleges and four-year institutions work better together to create student-friendly transfer pathways, and ensure the state can provide on-demand access to key data, particularly as it relates to the labor market outcomes of the students that enroll in our campuses. In addition, in the exec rec, the governor proposed $20 million in the LEO budget for talent solutions to address current and workforce needs. We're very supportive of this investment, but requesting that purchase of equipment, which is often the most expensive part of starting up a new high-tech program, be specified as an allowable expenditure for community colleges partnering with businesses to address talent solutions. Let's talk about college affordability. As I mentioned, the expansion that was approved last year using federal dollars to expand Michigan Reconnect to 21 is temporary. Students must apply for this 21, if they're 21 to 24 years old, they must apply by this fall to take advantage of this program. Our ask would be to make this Reconnect expansion to 21 a permanent part of our student financial aid programming at the state. Second, to provide recent high school graduates the opportunity to attend a community college tuition-free to earn a certificate, associate degree, or transfer to a university. I'll certainly dig more into this in just a moment. And then ensure our most vulnerable students, the students truly living in deep poverty, have financial support for their basic needs and non-tuition costs of attendance, including food, housing, transportation, technology, and textbooks. The mission of our colleges has grown beyond providing just high-quality education to include the fact that we have to provide support for students' basic needs or they will not complete. Basic need security is critical for ensuring academic performance, persistence, and graduation, and improving the well-being among students pursuing post-secondary education. Students drop out for a variety of reasons, but most often it's due to the need to work, to actually get a job to pay for their unmet basic needs. Books and supplies are one component of the cost of attendance. When you combine books, supplies, as well as technology, like getting a laptop, the average cost of that is $1,500 for for students enrolled. It's actually higher for programs like nursing and healthcare, where the supplies are significant. So I want to go into a little bit of detail on the Michigan Achievement Scholarship and the Community College Guarantee. To give a snapshot of last year's, class of 2023's college enrollment destination, you'll see that 38% of the class enrolled at a four-year institution, only 15% enrolled at a community college, but by far the biggest piece of this pie is the blue piece, those students that did not enroll. We posit that by making community college tuition free and sending a very clear and simple message to students that they will not have a tuition bill, that message will speak to those that live in the blue space, these students that did not go anywhere at all, and not poach those students that attended four-year universities, largely due to the generosity and the massive impact that the Michigan Achievement Scholarship has had by providing $5,500 for students attending public universities. Which is a good thing, I would like to say. It is a massive investment to help bring down the cost of those students attending four-year universities. We want those students to continue to enroll in four-year universities. That is good for them. Doesn't mean that this community college guarantee is not good for them. So I'll get into that in a little bit in a moment. Some of the reasons why we support broadly the governor's proposal to make community college tuition free for recent high school graduates, obviously it removes college affordability barriers, especially for those students that were unlikely to go to anywhere. It's also relatively inexpensive. So to the question about how much would it cost to make this available to both 2-year and 4-year, that cost would be pretty astronomical. We think that the cost for making this guarantee is roughly $20 million. To be able to say to every high school graduate that you at least have one option for a tuition-free option for the first 2 years of your college journey, it's relatively inexpensive to make a big, big policy statement. It ensures that we are maximizing federal dollars, i.e. the Pell Grant. It is a last dollar award as designed, which means we are actually optimizing the drawdown of federal dollars. As I mentioned, it's a really clear and simple message to low-income, first-generation college-going students like myself that they can go to college without a tuition bill. Most importantly, it creates a larger pipeline of students to transfer from a community college to a four-year institution to pursue a bachelor's degree. And to Representative DeBoer's comment, it preserves this buffet of option for students to pick what's the right match and fit for them. We believe that this is a reasonable goal, that we can work together to do this in the FY25 budget. Here's three kind of practical solutions that we think would actually strengthen the governor's original proposal without, that are relatively cost neutral. The first is to pair the community college guarantee with a transfer guarantee for community college graduates to pursue bachelor's degrees at four-year colleges and universities in Michigan. Dr. Hurley talked about the potential loss of revenue for that first and second year, but didn't address the possible huge gains in revenue in the third and fourth year for students that transfer to a four-year institution. Those transfer agreements and articulation agreements are absolutely critical to helping more students attain bachelor's degrees. The second recommendation is to increase the first dollar grant from $1,000 to $2,000 and target it to the very neediest students, i.e. Pell students, to give those students the critical support that they need to stay enrolled. So in the governor's proposal, she proposed a $1,000 grant on top of tuition and on top of last dollar tuition to help support with those basic needs like textbooks and supplies and transportation. But the means test for that was pretty high. So a student aid index of $30,000, which doesn't mean a lot to us, but relatively higher income families would qualify for that $1,000, and maybe those that didn't need it as much. We'd rather see a larger amount go to our truly neediest students. And then third, and this is more of a technical change, but convert the class of 2023 that enrolled in community college into this new program so that the state isn't having to administer one set of rules for the class of 2023 and a different set of rules for the class of 2024. Dr. Hurley mentioned Tennessee as an example, and I just would point out that I don't think that policy should be made based on sort of the potential inputs without looking at the outputs and outcomes. After the Tennessee announced its promise for community college students, their attainment levels went up. The overarching North Star goal of the state is to increase the percentage of people with a degree or certificate to 60% by the 2023. We should keep our eyes on the prize of attainment. In Tennessee, the percentage of students that had only a high school to college or some college and no credential went down. That's exactly what we want here in Michigan. Meanwhile, at every level, from certificate, associate degree, bachelor's degree, graduate degrees, and their overall attainment rate increased post the completion of the promise. So I will stop there and take questions, recognizing that you all have a hard stop, but I'll actually just close where my colleague Robert Lefevre said, and his last 3 points I would say that we fully agree with, that having this forward-looking tuition restraint is very helpful for us in terms of planning purposes, getting away from using TANF for student financial aid for relatively high-income families is good, and every single dollar that we dedicate to student financial aid, including the tuition grant, is a dollar well spent and would encourage the legislature to support the work of the tuition grant. Independent colleges are tremendous transfer partners and do a really good job serving our students once they leave our doors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandy, for your presentation. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so what we're going to do is two things. If you can email me your questions, we'll compile them all together, send them back to you. We can send them back to all of us, and then if we need to, maybe bring you back in 2 weeks to discuss some of the questions, if you don't mind. This is a very, very important presentation, and I just want to make sure that the community colleges are heard and all everyone's questions are answered. So thank you all very much. All right, and the subcommittee is now adjourned. Thank you all.